There is a particular exhaustion that comes from arguing with a fool, a drain that goes deeper than physical tiredness. Something that reaches into the core of who you are and pulls at the threads of your sanity. You've felt it before. That moment when you realize you've been trying to explain reason to someone who has no interest in understanding. Trying to share truth with someone who only wants to hear their own voice echo back at them. It's the recognition that you've lowered yourself into a pit of chaos, that you've allowed someone else's dysfunction to dictate the terms of your peace. Every man who has walked this earth long enough knows this feeling, this particular brand of regret that comes from engaging with people who operate on emotion, impulse, and ego rather than wisdom, logic, and truth. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago, and their wisdom echoes through time with a clarity that modern men desperately need to hear. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded armies and ruled an empire, knew that the greatest battles aren't fought with swords but with silence, that the strongest victories aren't won through argument, but through the discipline to walk away. Because here's what most men fail to understand until it's too late. When you argue with a fool, you don't elevate them to your level of reasoning, you descend to their level of chaos. And in that descent, you lose something precious. Something that can't be easily recovered. The fundamental mistake men make is believing that fools can be reasoned with. That if you just present the facts clearly enough, logically enough, patiently enough, then somehow the light will penetrate their darkness and they'll see what you see. But this is a fantasy, a delusion that has wasted more time and energy than perhaps any other misconception in human history. Fools don't argue because they seek truth. They argue because they need reaction. They crave drama. They feed on the attention that comes from conflict. A fool's goal isn't to understand your position. It's to make you frustrated. To watch you lose your composure. To drag you down into the mud where they feel most comfortable. When you engage with someone like this, you're not entering a debate or a discussion. You're stepping into a trap. And the moment you react emotionally, the moment you raise your voice or feel your blood pressure rise, you've already lost. The fool wins not by being right, but by making you look as unstable as they are, by proving that you can be moved, that you can be controlled, that your peace is conditional on external circumstances. Epictetus taught that we must distinguish between what is within our control and what is not, and other people's opinions, their irrationality, their need for drama. These things are fundamentally outside your control. The only thing you command absolutely is your response, your choice to engage or to remain unmoved. Your decision to protect your inner citadel or to throw open the gates and let the barbarians flood in. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, his meditations, that when you wake up each morning, you should tell yourself that you will encounter people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly, and that they are like this because they cannot distinguish good from evil. This wasn't pessimism, it was preparation, a psychological armor that protected him from the inevitable disappointments of dealing with humanity. He understood that wise men don't waste energy trying to change fools. They conserve that energy for things that actually matter, for their own growth, their own purpose, their own journey toward virtue. The Stoic doesn't argue to win because winning an argument with a fool is meaningless. It's like declaring victory in a game that nobody else respects or remembers. Fools argue from ego, defend positions they don't fully understand because admitting ignorance feels like death to them. The wise man, by contrast, argues only when there's something to be gained in terms of truth or understanding. And when he realizes he's dealing with someone who has no interest in either, he simply stops talking. This isn't weakness. This isn't surrender. This is the ultimate form of strength because it requires more discipline to remain silent than to unleash your thoughts. More control to walk away than to stand your ground against someone who isn't worth the ground you're standing on. Every moment you spend arguing with a fool is a moment stolen from your purpose, from your goals, from the things that actually build the life you want to live. Think about what that argument costs you. It's not just the minutes or hours you'll never get back, but the mental energy that could have been directed toward something meaningful. Think about how you feel after these encounters. Drained, irritated, questioning why you even bothered, replaying the conversation in your head for hours or even days afterward. The fool walks away unbothered. already onto their next drama, their next target, their next source of attention, while you're left carrying the weight of an interaction that should never have happened in the first place. This is what fools do. They export their chaos, they make their dysfunction your problem, and they thrive on the fact that you cared enough to respond. Meanwhile, everything that matters in your life, your health, your business, your relationships with people who actually deserve your time, your personal development, your peace of mind, all of this gets neglected because you chose to engage with someone who contributes nothing to your growth. Seneca warned that we're not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting it. And there is no greater waste than spending your finite energy on infinite stupidity. The Stoic understands that his attention is his most valuable resource. More valuable than money, more valuable than time itself, because attention is where time and consciousness meet, and where you direct your attention determines the quality of your existence. There is tremendous power in silence, a power that fools will never understand because they equate silence with weakness, not recognizing that it takes far more strength to withhold words than to release them. When you refuse to argue, when you simply look at someone with calm eyes and say nothing, or better yet, when you simply walk away without explanation or justification, you demonstrate a level of self-mastery that threatens people who have none. The fool interprets your silence as an admission of defeat, but everyone else, everyone who matters, sees it for what it really is: superiority. Not the arrogant kind of superiority that needs to announce itself, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily in the most pressure-filled environment imaginable. Surrounded by senators who plotted against him, advisors who gave him terrible counsel, enemies who wanted him dead. And he maintained his composure not because he was naturally calm, but because he trained himself to be unmoved by external chaos. The Stoic doesn't need to defend himself because his character defends itself through his actions over time. The Stoic doesn't need to prove he's right because he's more interested in being effective than being validated. When you argue with a fool, you're essentially asking for their approval, their acknowledgement that you're correct. And in doing so, you give them power over you. You make your peace conditional on their understanding, which will never come. Consider the modern battlegrounds, where fools thrive and wise men learn to disengage. Social media has become a coliseum of stupidity, where people who know nothing about anything argue with shocking confidence about everything. Where nuance dies and rage flourishes, where being loud is mistaken for being right. The Stoic man recognizes these platforms for what they are: tools that can be used wisely, or weapons that can destroy your peace. And he chooses carefully when and where to speak. He doesn't engage with strangers who leave inflammatory comments. He doesn't get pulled into political debates with people who have already made up their minds. He doesn't waste his time trying to correct misinformation being spread by someone whose entire identity is built on being wrong loudly. In the workplace, you encounter fools who thrive on gossip and drama, who try to pull you into their complaints about management or their feuds with coworkers, and the Stoic man remains professional but detached, contributing nothing to the fire, starving it of the oxygen it needs to spread. In relationships, you sometimes deal with people who use arguments as manipulation, who pick fights to get attention, who say outrageous things to provoke a reaction, and the wise man recognizes this pattern and refuses to dance to their music. Even in family situations where loyalty and love complicate everything, you encounter relatives who never grew up, who still operate from childhood wounds and adolescent thinking, and the Stoic loves them from a distance, maintains boundaries, and understands that you cannot save people from themselves. What you'll discover when you stop arguing with fools is that people begin to respect you more, not less. There's something magnetic about a man who doesn't need to defend every attack, who doesn't feel compelled to correct every misconception, who can hear criticism or insults and remain completely unbothered. This isn't apathy, it's immunity. It's the psychological armor that comes from knowing who you are so completely that other people's opinions become irrelevant noise. When you don't react, people don't know what to do with you. Fools especially become confused because their entire strategy depends on getting a rise out of you. When that doesn't work, when you deny them the reaction they're craving, they either escalate desperately or they move on to easier targets. And either way, you win by maintaining your peace. The people who matter, the people who are themselves wise and grounded, they notice your composure and they're drawn to it because it's so rare in a world full of reactive, emotional, unstable people. They recognize that you're operating on a different level, that you've done the inner work required to remain calm in situations that would send others spiraling. And this recognition becomes its own form of respect, a respect that's worth infinitely more than winning an argument. With someone whose respect means nothing, the ultimate truth that the Stoics grasped and that modern men need to internalize is this: not every battle deserves to be fought, and most battles don't even deserve to be acknowledged. A wise man chooses his conflicts carefully, asking himself whether engaging will move him closer to his goals or further from his peace, whether the person he's dealing with has the capacity for growth or whether they're committed to their ignorance, whether speaking will create understanding or just more noise. Most of the time, the answer is clear, and the answer is to remain silent, to let fools reveal themselves without your help, to focus your energy on what you're building rather than what you're defending. Epictetus said that if someone speaks badly of you, consider whether what they said is true, and if it is, then correct it, and if it isn't, then laugh at it. Because why would you be bothered by something false? This is the mindset that frees you from the need to argue, the recognition that truth doesn't need your defense, that your character will speak for itself over time, that people will judge you based on your actions and results rather than on how well you argued with idiots on the internet or at the office or at family gatherings.